All right. Well, as usual, welcome everybody to this next masterclass on communication. Now, during this class, I wanted to discuss some of the fundamentals. Mostly it's going to be applicable to your rank games, but it can also be applicable to you guys, anybody who's in a team, maybe just looking to get in a team, maybe you actively participate in tournaments already, you're scrimming. I think this class still can be highly beneficial because I see a lot of people, they have questions about this topic on just how to communicate effectively, what kind of role should communicate what, especially the teams I'm coaching currently, so hope it can be helpful for some of those guys too. And we will start with some of the basics here. We just will start with some of the breaking down the roles a little bit, and then afterwards I will give you general tips, and we also going to use some in-game examples. I prepared the Scrim is going to be one of the teams you're probably familiar with, a Schmongoose team over there, the more of the streamer team, because I think mostly the guys who I've been trying to get the codes from, they've been pretty private about that, so yeah, we just got the code from those guys. Now, from my experience, because I've been actively playing in the games like Overwatch and Marvel Rivals as well, I find that communication is important, but not the most important thing. Because first of all, we want to solve our performance, and if you notice that your performance is decent and you can communicate with your team as well while performing really well, then I think you can start paying attention to communication topic. That's why I usually suggest for anyone who is just starting the beginner around the lower ranks, around bronze, silver, gold, plat, usually start with paying attention to your performance first, and only later you can start paying attention to the communication more. Yeah, the degree of how much communication is going to be important, it will increase the higher you are in the rank, because we're trying to sneak in additional percentages of value there, and especially in the scrims, those percentages of value going to be really important. Me as a player, I've been actively participating in tournaments in Overwatch. For any of you guys who know me, I've been also top 10 in Overwatch as well on the tank, and I've been coaching teams afterwards. It's been tier 2 scene. I've been coaching players from some of the teams there. It's been not officially, but they've been getting coaching from me, so I've been solving some of their communication problems. We've also been solving some of the communication problems with the higher or just more casual teams, higher tier still, but they've been playing open division, tier 3 scene, and I also been recently, for the most part, coaching collegiate scene, and it's been for 3 years so far. So most of the communication things we're going to talk about, those going to be mostly from all those sessions with those players. Now, let's just start with the basics. So we will start with this chart here, which I really like to use because I think this represents just how your comm structure will look like. Maybe any of you guys who are familiar with this chart, I already shared that in how to scout class, how to just be effective with scouting. And what it looks like is just understanding of the flow of the fight, okay? Usually when there is a fight, let's say this here, we're starting the fight, maybe we won the fight, we getting in a cleanup, just trying to make sure everything is, well, we maybe getting the staggers, we don't have any of the enemy teammates around, and after that, we typically ult tracking, after that we plan, and trying to set up based on the plan, scout afterwards, and execute everything. I will dive more in depth based on the roles. I will break down each role, tank, duelist, and strategist, what you guys should be doing usually in terms of communication. And if you're gonna have any questions, of course, feel free to ask those. I actually want to make sure the chat is open. Okay, so if you guys gonna have any questions there, just message, or you can also unmute. Okay, let's just start with the tank role. I will break down this a little bit more. Okay, let's just go back to here. Okay, with the tank, I think most of what you're doing, especially as a perspective of the tank player as well, in my opinion, you can be doing some of the ult tracking. That is fine, especially if you're high tier player. I, in my experience, would be able to track every possible ult, not at the highest, most perfect percentage, but usually this is something you can do. Any high tier player can do that, but there's typically less emphasis if you're talking about the team setting on ult tracking if you're talking about the tank, because as a tank you don't have too big of an overview. Even though you kind of in the front line, you lead the things, I think ult tracking is less of your responsibility, but planning is a big stuff. The planning part is where once ult tracking is done, we start to plan around those 3 questions. It's going to be, what are we doing, where are we doing that, and when we're doing stuff. Okay, mostly you want to pay attention to location. In my opinion, that is the biggest emphasis, because tanks, they lead the fight, they initiate the engage, all the attention goes to you, you absorb pressure, and then the rest of your team, especially duelists, they can do damage, strategists, they can follow up with their damage, and supporting as well. And location, just calling that out where we're doing stuff is really important. The example of that could be, okay, I'm diving in as Venom on their Mantis or their Lunar Snow. Call out the exact location. The more accurate you are, the best you will do in terms of synchronizing the pressure. Even though you just tell your teammates, okay, I do this. Yeah, you just tell them basically where you're going to be. This is a big, huge help, because you can synchronize your pressure together, and you and your teammates can also prepare resources. Yeah, maybe there's a big stuff you can play around. You basically want to make sure all of that pressure is synchronized. There's also questions, what are we doing and when we're doing that. Can also be in you, but first off, the big emphasis is on really where we're fighting, especially if you more dive tank. Your space is pretty volatile. You can dive anywhere. Yeah, you can dive the back line, you can dive the front line, you can be pretty fast with all of this cooldowns. So I think this is important. And once you called out the plan, once you just understood where part, you want to try to set up. And setting up is your responsibility mostly, I think, because you will be calling out where part, then you also will be probably calling out, this is where we go, yeah, this is where we'll probably set up. Of course, you can change the location of your setup. If you look at this chart here, by the way, this chart is from one of the coaches. I just screenshotted that. Maybe you guys familiar with that coach. Their name is Thor. They've been coaching Overwatch. I just used this chart from one of their Overwatch macro fundamentals, but I pretty much follow this chart. I agree with this chart pretty much too when I was coaching too, so why not to use this here. But anyway, once we've done the setup, we can try to scout, but then repeat the setup as well if it's needed. You use a tank, you can call out the setup one more time if you want to change the location of the setup for whatever reason. And scouting, well, this topic we went over in our previous masterclass, but it's mostly going to be important for you to do pre-fight scouting if you have high mobility. Why I'm saying that is because if you have high mobility, then you can quickly scout what's going on, where the enemy team is, what they have, what not, where they're going, where they're rotating, and then afterwards we can go back to the original setup location. So that's why there's even this arrow here. We've done the scouting. Imagine you play a Venom or Hulk, you can just try to go in, try to scout somewhere, and after that you just go back to the original positioning where you want to be, so you're not getting your cooldowns forced. You want to abuse the fact that you have mobility, and scouting is really important because it can maybe catch you off guard. Sometimes if you don't do that, it can also prepare your own setup a little bit better, tell your teammates what's going on. It's a big thing. If you're in a ranked game, obviously you can communicate that, at least ping is a big thing, and making sure that everybody knows what's going on. I just want to say that because you're mostly in frontline. What I mean by frontline is not that we always kind of staying with our team in the front. It's just frontline to me is you initiating. That's why you're at the front in terms of pressure. There's a lot of absorbing pressure in the end. That's why for in my experience for you, it's going to be hard to scout angles. What I mean by that is the parts of the map where there are more flank routes, where they're going around the map a little bit. Yeah, for example, if we look at this here, we see that Doctor Strange is going forward here, but it's going to be hard for them to exactly scout what's going on here or what's going on underneath, or maybe sometimes even what's going on the left side, because you kind of the front, you just see a lot of the stuff in front, you scout that pretty easily, but the angle is going to be harder. Unless you're playing high mobility character, maybe you can scout a little bit more, but typically it's going to be tough, I think. So it's not your responsibility to scout angles too much. In terms of execution, tank usually can target call. It's you calling out exactly what are you going towards, especially if you're playing more stationary tank. Like in this case, we see there's Doctor Strange and Emma, and there's Schmongo's team, and that is their name. For anyone, if you guys don't know, that is literally their name. So I'm yeah, that's why I'm using that. And Emma, Frost, they're more stationary. Bogger here, they're also more stationary. So they will be calling out the targets. Okay, I'm shooting this mag. Maybe I'm shooting anybody at the back line, and afterwards, everybody ideally should follow up their pressure or understand what they can do with their resources in terms of the setup, in terms of maybe getting another angle, maybe trying to prepare some of their cooldowns. This is how it usually looks like. Okay, and I usually prefer, if you're looking at this from the basic level, if you want to get into target calling communication, when you're calling out, you engage and execute, try to start with simple 3-1 call. That's what we've done. Is if some of you guys participate in the scrims before when I was leading those, I've been telling guys, okay, let's just do simple 3-1 call. Venom and Salak, so you guys synchronize together. Venom could be calling out 3-2-1, diving Luna Snow. Okay, and also just make sure your Salak is ready. You're gonna be asking them, are you ready to dive? 3-1, let's dive Luna Snow, and then we try to go in. And you can also call out disengages afterwards and stabilize. When you're out, you try to just get out of that location, and that is typically when your team start to playing slower. They try to play cover more. We'll talk about that in a practical example too, but yeah, this is how it usually looks like. Afterwards, you will notice you probably will need to increase the speed. At the high tier, people even ignore, they're not ignoring the 3-1 call completely, but they kind of skipping because it's just a little bit too slow. They just starting with, okay, let's die Luna Snow, because everyone assume everybody is already at a good location, they're ready to dive in, so there's only confirmation needed. Let's dive, okay, let's do that, let's go. That is how it usually goes, but start with 3-1 call. I think that has been a big one. That's what we done back in the days as well, when I was in tournaments with other teams as well. If you just get into that, that's perfect. Now, mid-fight scouting is your responsibility too, I think. It's just gonna be 50-50. Okay, I'm gonna say that because it depends. It depends on situation, and you definitely, because you participate in the fight, you're absorbing a lot of pressure, you can be scouting some of the stuff where some of the enemy teammates are. If you can see them, maybe somebody's low, maybe somebody is out of position, maybe there are also cooldowns which are being used in the fight somebody was not able to notice, and that's a pretty big thing. As you could see, there are a lot of responsibilities on your end, but that's why for the tank it's really important to be vocal, in my opinion. If you can try to sneak in additional value with that and just tell your team what is going on, what are you doing, when you're doing that, and where, that is pretty big thing whenever you're trying to play comp, whenever you're trying to play in a team setting. So that's pretty much it. Now we will get to this more practical example. I will just go through all of this list here, what I mentioned so far, so it will make more sense. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can ask those. Do you have any questions now, actually? Anything you want to ask me about this list here? Okay. No questions? You guys can unmute if you want to ask something. If not, I will just show more practical. You just go through the list as we wanted. Yeah, I see someone start.
Good. All looks good.
Okay. Yeah, if it looks good, let's continue. Let's just go with the practical examples now. Going through the list. We're starting with Ultra Arcane, and this is when ideally, well, this is just the start of the fight, so we kind of skip that part for now. If we're looking at those both teams, we just skip the whole tracking, but we definitely don't want to skip planning. Yeah, what are we doing, where are we going? So maybe in this case, Borger and Andrew, they could be telling, okay, this is the location I want to push. By the way, that is something I will talk more about later in our future masterclasses, but there's differentiation in the role system. Ideally, usually you can, if we're talking about the tanks, for example, usually there's going to be main tank and off tank. Main tank is simply that guy who absorbs the main pressure, they lead the fight. Off tank is the person who is following up with more pressure, with just more damage-based cooldowns, damage-based abilities. That's how I would put it. So they are also taking space, but they're just doing that through more of the damage part, where just main tank, they are going in and absorbing pressure. In this case, it's going to be mainly Bogger, the main tank, and off tank is going to be Andrew. So most likely we expect calls from Bogger to try to just call out the plan. That is where we're going, guys. Okay, let's push top. Let's try to take that, and afterwards we do partially the setup. Yeah, we want to make sure that we get our own angles. We want to make sure we push the enemy out of something. Yeah, let's just watch from their perspective, maybe, so it's gonna be easier. Okay, so we're calling out. Let's do that. Try to just participate in this fight over here, and afterwards you see how they taking it slow, right? There's no rushing. They just doing the setup. They want to set up the angles. That's why I always say that people, you really want to play for the angles for the map control. You see the best teams, they're doing that always. Ideally try to control the angles, and afterwards you can actually do something towards the point. Yeah, you can try to push the point, you can try to control that, but make sure the angles are solved. That's why we see Kragi over here. You see the angle, they set up, we have this Borg over here. This is perfect, and now they can do the scouting. They quickly do the scouting cave where everybody else. Oh, we see this guy over here. Okay, and this execution starts. Let's shoot this guy. Let's shoot this. Maybe this Captain America, or maybe there's gonna be someone else like the Magneto. Let's shoot them. Yeah, you get a target called that, and make sure everybody's on the same page, so you're not just getting pressured by the other guys who we don't want to. Yeah, we don't want to be pressured by some whatever cheap damage. But see, this is perfect. The Boger's controlling this high ground really well. They're just trying to execute everything here, trying to pressure the enemy team away. Yeah, the important angles away. And during the mid fight, this is where it will be more chaotic, to be honest. You'll notice there's usually a lot of stuff going on, so sometimes you don't have to be on the same target. Keep that in mind. But anyway, there's just gonna be some partially understanding what your job is. Yeah, for example, sometimes this guy goes in. Okay, obviously he is a little bit out of position, but they can jump away. But the Boger, maybe in their case, they gotta keep in mind that there's gonna be pressure followed, so they either need to shut down this if this is really killable, or they could be just shutting down that follow-up, which can be even more important, I think, because usually with the follow-up there are more people and you want to absorb the biggest pressure, so this guy will actually die. If you guys remember, we talked about the kill zones. For some of you, maybe the previous, I think that, yeah, there was previous masterclass. There's can be direct or indirect pressure in the kill zone, so yeah, it just based on that masterclass. And you see them, they've been pressuring this high ground, this is what they need, and after that, this is where a lot of the mid-fight scouting should be going on, a lot of the call-outs about stabilize. Okay, let's stabilize, guys. Maybe, for example, in the case of Boger, when they will stabilize, it's typically when they don't have most of their shield. By the way, I just want you to see, go back a little, why they drop down. I think maybe partially it was because they lost most of their shield. Let's see. Yeah, we can see the shield is almost down. Okay, so this is when the call-outs and stabilize is going to be important if you don't have defensive and if you don't have most of your HP. That's how I would put it. Just simplify it this way. And afterwards, after you're done the stabilize, you call that out to your team. Stabilize. This is important. Stabilize. This is going to be a disengage call, and afterwards 3, 2, 1, let's push something. So this can be starting here. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's push this high ground afterwards. Okay, they also don't need to flick the shield. I think they need to just keep recharging that probably. But yeah, afterwards 3, 2, 1, let's try to push. We gotta deal with the angles. You gotta deal with the map control. This is really important. We just don't want to be keeping stuck in this main lane, right? Push the important angles out, and the Kragi also. Let's see, did they actually synchronize that pressure, yeah? So the Bogger goes in, and Craigie kind of flies up there as well, and probably it's partially because of the communication. I think there's a big emphasis on that. If you can communicate together, then this is perfect. This is how your engage typically looks like. Okay, I think we went over. Well, let's just watch until the end of the fight, and then we can talk about the other roles a little bit more. Okay, so there's a lot of going on. This is where if the fights are extended, still mid-fight, scouting, stabilizing is important. Scout, stabilize, yeah. Setup also partially. That's still important. But now the fight is over. Of course, we have to clean up. But technically, if you play it correctly, I think the fight for the most part will be over. Well, there can be a chance because there's Captain America is alive. I think if they get one more member, then that's gonna be tough. But mostly, I think there's a much bigger advantage at the Team B, the Schmungus team. Most likely, they will, everything's gonna be fine for them. And this is where the cleanup starts. The cleanup stage. Let's just go back to this here. Cleanup stage starts, and you should already start ultragging. You should already, even though you're the tank, you can be thinking about your ultimate. Maybe try to tell your teammates, okay, this is how I want to try to set it up. This is where I want to start. This is what I want to use and when. It's always fine if you can be more proactive, thinking about your ultimates this way. And of course, there are some ultimates, especially in team settings, some ultimates you prefer engaging with. But anyway, just especially if we're talking about the rank, find out what you can do proactively with with some of your ultimates anyway, because if we're playing the ranked, we don't want to necessarily wait for the people to assume that they're gonna be using something. And maybe you can ask them, do they want to initiate? That's fine. But I think for the most part, in my experience as well, when I've been grinding to the highest rank, I was mostly just setting up and planning out what I want to do and make sure teammates can help me out as well with that stuff. That's how I would personally do. And especially if we're talking about the tank, because you will be initiating, that's going to be perfect. Yeah, you can also be thinking about what kind of big plays you can be supporting. Yeah, maybe one of your teammates really close to the ultimate. In this case, Necros, they close to their Ultron ultimate. Well, how can I be supporting that as a tank, so the plan will be executed? That's why it's going to be important to call out location where are we doing stuff. I probably really would like them to try to fight around this area here, because you can use additional verticality on this Ultron and will not get spotted too much, so you can try to just maybe bait them to push in, try to fire their backline. I think this is going to be really good. Let's see what they do though. To be honest, I didn't watch that. Okay, I think this is okay-ish timing, and we see that they've been exclusively, you see where Borger is holding, yeah? They probably exclusively telling, okay, let's try to push this choke, guys. I would probably prefer them to make sure there's more pressure extended, make sure that the enemy team walk in a little bit to the choke, but still, this is okay, you see? Because you're calling out the location, this is where we want to start stuff, okay? Probably there's a big thing if your teammates can follow up with whatever they want to initiate with. You want to be on the same page around your big resources. So yeah, they start with that. That's fine. They're trying to force out some of the support ult. Yeah, in this case, they forced out Line Pro ultimate on the Rocket Raccoon. That's fine. They even got a kill there, so it got some value. Okay, and this part, this is where we just need to keep pushing. Yeah, keep doing stuff. Okay, and exclusively try to maybe call out the stabilize call when you push in a little bit more. That's how it looks like. Okay, I think for the most part that's it about the tank. I know we just watched this first fight, but yeah, anyway, this is how it's gonna be. I'm just gonna break down every role, and we're gonna look at multiple fights this way. Do you have any questions, guys? Feel free to ask those if there are any. I see there's Zach typing. You can also unmute. It's fine. But take a slight break to answer the questions if there are any. Not at the moment. Thank you, man, so far. Okay. Perfect. Let's keep watching. Now, I just want to talk about this support role. I think it was strategist. Okay. We're gonna use same flow chart. Just break it down. Watch the example of the game I showed you. And yeah, if there are going to be any questions, obviously ask me those two. Now, about strategists, usually there's bigger emphasis on how you ult track. Why is that the case? Because when you're playing strategist, you are playing more in the backline, and if from any of you guys who've been getting masterclasses as well, you know that I always say angles are important. Even on the support, angles are extremely important. You cannot just afford always be around the main lane. If you can do something different, try to take off angles, especially if you're talking about just start of the fight when you're getting slight more advantage. Yeah, so make sure you do that through the map control first. And then afterwards, you can try to do something. Anyway, because you're in the back line, you have better overview, typically, and that's why you can see what is going on with your team and with the enemy. That's why you will be ult-tracking and ideally saying what kind of ultimates the enemy have, and what kind of ultimates they're close to. Close to is simply all about 80%. If they are on 80% plus, then they usually gonna have their ultimate in the fight. That's how you want to be ult tracking on support. So you'll be saying, okay, they maybe in this case when they will be going in the next fight, they will be saying, okay, they have this Punisher ultimate. They also have Cloak and Dagger and Ultron with Magneto. Okay, so 4 ultimates. Why this stuff is important? Because it affects your planning afterwards. If you ult track really well and telling to your team that what kind of stuff on the map is there, then it's going to be easier for your tank to decide where to set up. You can also be setting up at the bad angle and answer those 3 questions better. Yeah, what are you doing, when you're doing that, and where? Because there's one part where what do we do with our plays, but you can also think about what do we bait as well. Like in the case of if we remember this previous fight when Ultron just ulted first to bait out something. Yeah, in that case they bait out Rocket Raccoon ultimate. So this is really good if we can keep doing that. Now another part is usually, yeah, and we kind of mentioned that, but when you're finishing the killing up, this is when ult tracking starts. Ultimately, you're just gonna be trying to already communicate that because there's a limited time. You need to set up, you need to think about the planning, you need to also try to solve some of the specifics, maybe some of the small ability usage typically. So it's really important. You're doing the cleanup, the ult tracking starts, and you will be mostly responsible for, in terms of planning, what and how you gonna be using, in my opinion. Yeah, what and how, because tank is mostly gonna be responsible with location of the fight. Right? They ideally, okay, I still want to say that everybody should answer those questions: what, where, and when you do stuff. 3 W's in a way, but you as a support, there's a big emphasis on this how or what part, I think, because there's a lot of ultimates which allow to stabilize the fight. There's a lot of ultimates you can initiate with typically. So I think this is nice if you can do that. And I usually like to, when we try to focus on baiting something, like I said, this is really good because you've done ult tracking, and after that you're trying to do the setup, as we mentioned, and scouting. Scouting is a little bit interesting for the support because you are not necessarily in the front line like the tank, but still you get to think about where the enemies are. So most of your responsibilities are try to scout enemy flanks or off angles because you have bigger overview. Like we saw the first fight there. If you, as a strategist in the backline, you can kind of see more in theory. Usually, of course, that depends, but usually that's your job, and you can ping the enemy teammates and think about how you can set up your own pressure and your own angles so you can pressure them back. You can just deal with them a little bit more. And I also think that you potentially can try to scout just for any role if possible, but there's still bigger emphasis on trying to scout the cooldowns and the ultimates. Yeah, what has been used, pay attention to that, because there's going to be really important in terms of ult tracking, what the enemy has, what not, so you will know when to press your ultimate, when to not press your ultimate, and maybe prepare some of your abilities even. Yeah, maybe if they have something like you playing Lunar Snow, you can freeze somebody out of their ultimate, right? This is pretty big. And there's says a lot about the supports. You can try to disrupt the enemy team a lot of times. Okay, I think with execution, it's just mostly calling out, after you engaging, calling out weak targets, maybe something you can follow up on. You notice that supports typically control the flow of the fight, kind of playing fast or slow, yeah, because ultimates allow you to stabilize, so this is a pretty big thing as well. You participate in the stabilize mid fight a lot of times. That's why it's also on you to call out when you initiating, you call out if initiating without call out, if you're trying to disengage. It's usually when ultimate is about to end, you're gonna tell your team, okay, 3, 2, 1, and then I'm out. Yeah, something like, for example, I don't know, Luna Snow ultimate, or maybe Mantis. This is typically what the supports will do. They will try to get in, say, okay, 3, 2, 1, ultimate's about to end, and make sure they set up, and everybody will be ready with their positioning. Okay, let me see. What's the impact of the Star-Lord in this encounter, and should a character like Star-Lord be looking to clean up this fight or set up for the next bout? Anybody can clean up. Cleanup stage, anybody can do that. You have the time. Well, Star-Lord is specifically bad at the cleaning up because you have high mobility, so you can clean up and set up. There's no doubt. You have time. That's why you see them actually pushing up. They're comfortable with that a lot of times. They can clean up, go after that to try to set up the different space, the angles, and should be all right. Okay, let's just break down the support using this example a little bit more as well. Okay, let me see, strategies, sorry. As a strategist, what are some indicators to ult, and what are some examples of when support players would typically ult when they shouldn't? Well, mostly indicators to ult. Well, if we're talking about the team setting, a lot of it should be discussed with the team. What are you initiating with? I usually suggest just, if you have more offensive type of ultimate, try to initiate with that. Maybe create some sort of path or damage part, and you try to initiate, like Cloak and Dagger is good to initiate with, right? Necros and Ultron, good initiation as well. When to not ult? Well, again, depends, but mostly in my experience, people ulting at the wrong times because they're not reading the flow of the fight correctly. They just over ult. Even in that case, I wonder, if we just go back a little, I wonder if this ultimate from Bogger is needed at this current moment. Let's just watch. So they got... Yeah, so they almost got the Magneto. Well, they actually did got the Magneto. Let's just see. Yeah, so the Magneto is pretty dead. So I don't think that you gotta ult here because you have already big advantage. You have 6 with 3. And that's what I mean. This is what makes the bad ultimate sometimes. I don't think you have to. Even though it might secure the fight faster, but you simply have bigger tempo. So you can just push the enemy back all the time. And that's what I see with the support as well. It just sometimes might be ulting at the wrong times when there's no need to stabilize. There's no need to maybe initiate because you already have a big advantage on the map. That's how I would put it. Okay, I just look at the next fight. Break down the strategies still a bit more. So this is when Ultra can start. As we mentioned, ideally we're trying to just make sure we get all of their close ultimates, what they have, and try to readjust setup accordingly. Well, this really depends because there's a lot to bait out, right? You cannot play around everything, but at least pick something you are trying to bait with your own big stuff. So what kind of big stuff we have? Well, maybe we can initiate with Star-Lord, maybe we can initiate with Cloak and Dagger, or maybe we can initiate with Frost to bait out what? Yeah, this also depends. You can pick out depending on the situation. I think it might be okay for them to try to force out something like Magneto ultimate's pretty big, maybe even their support ultimate as well. Yeah, it just really depends on how they want to approach it. There's no wrong, I think, direction. It can be always solved with multiple directions, but yeah. You can see that the cleanup stage is really important too. How they're pushing up, they're taking space. No playing on card. There's only one person playing on card who can contribute to the fight anyway. Yeah, this is how it usually goes. Take space, yeah. And this is when we ultra can, and we actually need to plan out what do we do with the ultimates and set up accordingly. It seems that they set up to fight the choke, so I'll probably expect them to either initiate with Cloak and Dagger, maybe in Wiz, yeah, it can be in Wiz, Cloak and Dagger, or Frost. I'm not too sure, to be honest, what they're gonna be initiating with there. Yeah, they initiated with Cloak and Dagger. As we kind of mentioned, I think those type of ultimates, like Cloak and Dagger, because it creates the path in a way, is really good. You can definitely initiate with that a little bit more. You see that there's a second ultimate following up as well with the pressure, and the enemy answering is 2 ultimates, so in terms of tempo this is fine, and we're just gonna be trying to make sure that we win the fight based on that, and enemy currently following up with their 2 ultimates, and it's gonna be really important to stabilize for this red team. They're trying to stabilize even in Wiz. There's a lot of chaos, but still important for you as support to track during this chaos. Yeah, if we look at for example, let's look at the KG. Yeah? It's really important for you to scout, see what's going on, who use what, and think about what you can do during the next fight. See their position as well. They're not trying to position really behind their team. Yeah, they kind of on their own angle. That's what I say. Do the angle stuff too, because you can force out the cooldowns on you and stay alive, so your teammates can stay alive too. And meantime, we just kind of keep up the pressure and healing at the same time. Scout what's going on, the big stuff, what they use, what kind of big abilities are being used as well, so we can go based of that. I don't know what's big can be used. I don't know, maybe there's a Magneto bubbles. You notice Magneto use bubbles. Okay, let's try to push up that a little bit more. Maybe there's going to be something like Punisher turret, again, big stuff. Let's try to play around that, maybe stabilize or push more. If they're really vulnerable, we can kill them. It's just an example, right? So we see them kind of also really good at following up the pressure. In this is where you can also target call weak targets if somebody's not noticing. Sometimes you support have better vision, so it's totally fine. Maybe call out the Magneto here. Yeah, why Magneto? Because he's really low HP, and notice their cooldowns. They most likely don't have their bubble. Yeah, because they done the ultimate, they've been pretty aggressive. So this is your responsibility to call that out as support if you can. Okay? Pulling out weak targets and mostly scouting. And now, when the fight starts, I kind of didn't emphasize that, but it's important when we're doing the scouting right after the setup, it's going to be your responsibility to look at the angles, what the enemy is gonna, who is gonna take off angles. So for example, here we see Dusty or maybe even KG. They could be potentially scouting, checking, oh, there's this guy on the angle over here, or there's this guy taking an off angle here. This is your responsibility because you have better vision. That's how it usually goes. Okay, do you guys have any questions about this? You can also unmute if there are any. If not, we can just move towards the duelist. But duelist is going to be pretty straightforward, to be honest. Because duelist, I think there's not too much. Should you still take angles Mantis? Yes, 100%. As Mantis, you have a lot of damage outputs, so you should be doing that a lot. There's less emphasis on the angles if you're more stationary support and more healing oriented as well. The Mantis, there's such a big damage output, and definitely should. You usually should do that. It's going to be off angles around 60 degrees, sometimes can be 90 degrees as well, away from your core. The Mantis is not played right now that much, but yeah. Alright, yep. Now let's just look at the DPS. Well, I just call it DPS. Well, it's called Duelist. So it's accurate. Okay, Duelist, it's gonna be less demanding for you to communicate. Why? Because usually duelists are more mechanically demanding, and because you're more mechanically demanding, that means a lot of your attention goes towards what you're doing with your own bullets, with your own shots. For example, in the case of Kragi, yeah, it's really mechanical demanding to be able to use all the abilities on Star-Lord, and even somebody like, I don't know, the enemy team, yeah, Frostin, maybe there's a Bucky. It's also hard for you to land the hook, depending on the situation. There's more mechanically demanding abilities, so you will not do most of the communication, in my opinion, but still, this depends on the team. Obviously, there will be duelists which are comfortable with that. We do notice in the Overwatch as well, there's you can solve all of this chart however you like it, to be honest, but there's a tendency it's going to be harder for duelists to do proper communication. Okay, it's going to be hard for them to be fully on track with everything. Okay, that's why ult-tracking is usually low priority. In my opinion, you still can't do that if you're the high rank player. You should be able to track most of the ultimates still, but being the most accurate, not your priority. Usually it's going to be strategists. If we're talking about the planning, is also low priority, but you will be participating when to initiate with something if you have your ultimate especially ultimate. Yeah, you playing Star-Lord, you have your ultimate. Okay, let's think how to initiate. Yeah, like in the case, if we go back, oh, well, we can even watch the next fight. Yeah, Kragi, they're gonna be probably taking off angle slot. They will need to think about how to initiate a lot of times because they have their ultimate, tell their team, okay, I have my ultimate, let's try to set it up here, answer those 3 questions, what you want to do, where and when. Yeah, and it's gonna be easy to follow up. Yeah, you can also communicate what kind of position you're taking, so you can adjust the setup afterwards. But most of your setup based on where most of your team is attacking, because you're controlling space through the damage. That's why it highly depends on where your tanks are fighting, the rest of your team is fighting. That's why you want to make sure you do damage towards those areas mostly. And maybe sometimes you can also win one-on-ones too, especially if we talking about higher mobility characters like Star-Lord, but most of that is going to be based on where most of your team is fighting. Okay, so for example, here maybe your tank is calling, okay guys, we got to push the stop, this is important. Maybe they're not calling that, but still you can look. In the rank, there's less communication, but it's fine. You can look and just see visually what's going on. And after that, you can think, okay, let's start a setup here, and probably thinking about what are we initiating with. Yeah, maybe on Star-Lord, you want to try to initiate with your ultimate, then call this out. In this case, their team, they made a call to try to initiate with Necros. I think that's completely fine. Yeah, it's good ultimate to initiate with the Ultron. And then afterwards, maybe there's going to be time where they want to be following up. Also notice there's a drone on this Star-Lord here. Probably it's really good most of the time because there will be some similarities in what angles they take with Ultron. That's why your pressure is mostly kind of you're following up on what's going on, if that makes sense. You just making sure, okay, there's an action here and there. You try to follow up with that with the damage output, have the best position possible, and it's going to be good. Try to call out still. Try to call out what do you want to be doing. Yeah, I think this fight, let me see, are they going to be... Probably they're not going to use anything. I think there's this one. Okay, Kragi is gonna be not using their ultimate. Let's just get to the point when they will be actually doing something. They might maybe stabilize here if it's really needed, but I think it's a bad decision if they would use that here, because you just win the fight slower, yes, but we have ultimate coming in the next one. Okay, let's see what's gonna happen. They're taking an angle, we see a really deep angle, really good. That's what they want to do in Star-Lord, okay? They kind of will be using verticality a lot, try to set up. Probably calling out, okay, should we initiate with that? Maybe initiate with the Gamora and then follow up with the Kragi, yeah? Stuff like that. Maybe we can also do the Kragi first, or force out something like Magneto, and then afterwards do the Gamora ultimate, yeah? Depends, yeah? They decided to initiate with Andrew. Yeah, so see, Andrew goes in, and then they are kind of... It's almost synchronized, right? The Andrew goes almost first. The Kragi starts first, though, but ideally, I think Andrew can go first, and then Kragi starts. But still, it's pretty decent. And we're following up on this kill zone area. And this is how it looks like. You should be actively... In the case of duelists, usually there's a really important for you to target call. Specifically, if there's something... interesting you notice, something what the rest of your teammates can notice because of the nature of your character. Yeah, for example, here we see that there's only Star-Lord who can actively take this position, maybe Doctor Strange as well. So nobody else can do that. That's why you typically call out this kind of more specific stuff. Maybe somebody used their ability, somebody is out of position, but it's less specific. This is only most of your calls, in my opinion. And yeah, obviously for this, we're trying to call out when we want to engage actively, just like that, and sync the pressure a little bit more. You see, this is really well done by this team, and probably Necros ultimate. I don't think it's needed. I think it's a little bit overruled, but yeah, still, this is all right. I think this looks fine overall. Okay. Let's just look at the... Yeah, so mostly it's gonna be scouting specific stuff. Yeah, you can also do pre-fight scouting too, okay? Especially during those moments. I just go forward a little bit more. So in this case, your Kragi, they can potentially, if map allows them, try to think where they can be. Well, maybe take a little bit more verticality. Maybe try to just see where, if there are any angles with the high grounds they can take, try to scout. Yeah, in this case they probably send Necros to scout, maybe. Yeah, let's see who is gonna scout, but there's gonna be somebody with verticality. If there's no one scouting, like this guy, yeah, Necros, especially if it's not team setting, I think it can be your responsibility also do that, yeah. And you will see probably Kragi that will try to take somewhat of verticality later anyway. But in this case, the Necro is scouting. Yeah, this is fine. He gives verticality too. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else? Okay, what else we didn't mention? Yeah, target calling can be a responsibility because you're shooting, you call out what you're shooting, and follow up with the tank strategies, calls, and the pressure, in my experience. That's how we usually would go about that. And you usually will notice there's going to be a little bit of similarity with, because you do take angles a lot on duelists, depending on the duelist still, but you can take those deep off angles, like we saw in the case of Kragi. Star-Lord can do that. They take a little bit of verticality, more wider angles, flanks, and that's why it's going to be important for you to scout enemy on those off angles and call that out to your team if someone is going to be there. In this case, the blue team, they didn't have anybody on the angle, but maybe right now there's Star-Lord. Maybe that is something what we probably will be needing to scout. Okay, so it's just, if we look at the flow of the fight, yeah, this should be kind of done even before the fight, or maybe even in the mid-fight. We ideally should be scouting, okay, maybe this guy is taking off angle slightly, or maybe there's going to be someone else going over here, yeah? This still can be important. Okay, I think for the most part, that's it. About the roles, I mentioned most of the stuff. What you guys are going to be communicating? Maybe any questions? We'll get to more general if we have enough time to go over all of this. But yeah, there's going to be more general advice, which is applicable to ranked as well. Now, if there are any questions, you can unmute as well. That's totally fine. Okay, I see Zach is tapping. Also, Paradox, I did answer your question. Didn't make sense. I hope that I didn't answer. I didn't ask if that made sense with the example I provided. Yeah, I'm listening. Oh, okay, all good. Just want to make sure. Okay, let's continue with general stuff then. How different is Series 3 shooter Apex from this 6v6? I'm coming from Apex comp to Rivals. Understandable. Okay, I've been playing Apex as well. Not professionally or anything. I've been not coaching that, but I'm thinking about the similarities and what's different. Well, I'll mention what's different. Different, well, definitely the ability stuff. In Apex, there are not too many abilities. Yeah, we looking at this, there's more emphasis on mechanics shooting. Yeah, there's also some of the stuff about the resources, yeah, what you kind of have in your own inventory. Here, you don't have anything in your inventory. You just have that character. This is your entire inventory, all these bullets. You can change that, so there's a big difference in that. You gotta keep that in mind. And some people compare this hero shooters. Yeah, this is a shooter plus MOBA. Yeah, if any of you guys played MOBA, League of Legends or Dota, there are a lot of similarities in terms of how lanes are being controlled, how resources are being thrown at everybody. There are no items in this game, right? But there's some of the aspects like maybe team ups or some of the ultimates is similar to those kind of games. So there are a lot of similarities to that. Yeah, if you notice, I've been not playing something like League of Legends or Dota, but anyway, there are some similarities for sure. I've been mostly into hero shooters, exactly. Well, I've been playing some shooters too, obviously, but mostly it's been Overwatch, and now it's also this Marvel Rivals currently. This reminds me a lot of MOBA. I've never played them, but I noticed that a lot. Yeah, exactly. That's how it usually looks like. The flow of the fight, really similar. The way you trade abilities. That's why I always say this kind of games, it's not purely mechanics. That's why a lot of people, when they tell me I'm struggling with mechanics, yes, this can be true, but mostly can be fixed to your positioning and decisions. Because if you're the best position possible, you have good decisions, can anticipate stuff, then it's going to be easier for you to learn abilities. Okay, it's going to be easier for you to do stuff on the map. So it's a lot of similarities. Game of resources, those kind of games, it's a game of resources. You force out more resources compared to the enemy team. Yeah, they force out less from you. You win the fight. Okay, that's how it usually goes. And resources is everything. It's your abilities, it's your ultimates, it's your positioning. I really think positioning is still needs development for a lot of players, a lot of teams. They kind of keep a lot of time stacking down main when there is still angles can be approached. But we saw Schmongus example. Yeah, they've been using angles pretty actively though. Yeah, they've been utilizing those, to be honest. So this is nice. What do you think will translate well from Apex to Rivals, and what do you think can be some of the struggles? Mechanics for sure. Tempo of the fight in a way a little bit too. Yeah, if you're talking about, yeah, if you're down one member, okay, you gotta play slower. You up one member, you gotta play faster. I'm going in, taking space. This is really important because if you're not taking space, then enemies stabilizing, then they can punch you back. And, right, so this is how I would view that. Okay, yeah, if there gonna be any more questions, let me know. But let me say, how could poke heroes or off tanks establish themselves in those situations? What kind of situations? You you talking about here? This example? I'm not sure. Can you specify? You can also unmute Paradox. Oh, are you talking about just 6 of 6 or yeah? I'm a little bit lost. Sorry. If you can give me more context. That's all right. Take your time. Take your time to write the question. For now, I'm just gonna look at the general tips a little bit. There's a lot of written stuff, but yeah, let's just have a free discussion on that. Just what we have time for. I mentioned that when you communicate, mostly, if we're talking about the rank, the teams, it's going to be mostly your communication of what you do, when you do that. Okay, I can even type in big what you do that, what you do, when you do that, and where you do. To be honest, if you want to learn anything out of this class, you want to apply anything out of this class, this is the most important you can apply. Really, this is the most important. This is the most crucial. Okay, let's maybe mark it with the red text. Okay. I'm just gonna do that. It's just one of the most essential tips. I don't think you have to even pay attention to any other stuff. Just start with that. Start with that pretty much. And the other stuff is, I a lot of times tell players try to focus on what helps you to win the fight. When we try to communicate to your teammates, when you're trying to communicate in ranked, a lot of people would say stuff like, why are you not supporting me? Why this X someone, yeah, what this stalwart is there, or how they killed me, or I'm so frustrated because of this and or that, or what is happening? Yeah, a lot of those calls examples are not the most effective because you are creating more chaos. You're not giving your teams direction of what to focus on. That's why I always suggest maybe some of you guys been participating in scrims. Yeah, if you can also apply that, there's really good. A lot of people, especially the newcomers, they struggle with that. A lot of times the communication looks this way, but if you say exactly the information which contributes to winning the fight, stuff like the location of the enemy, what cooldowns, ultimates they used, and other important info, then this gives you direction of what's gonna happen next. Yeah, what your teammates can do. Maybe they can catch somebody low, maybe they can catch somebody out of position, stuff like that. Maybe even ultimate stuff. Yeah, let me see. Like in the situations, okay, Paradox, like in the situations given or just in contesting the high gun. Earlier, Boger was setting up on the high gun. Should a hero like Hawkeye Punish already be set up there to try to fight them? It feels like being the receiving side of that setup. It lets them collapse on you if you give the Orchestra the high gun early. Yes, 100%. You should be fighting that back. This is the main point. I always say that the map control, you kind of have the stage of try to take the position. If we're talking about the setup, you can even separate this on C stages. Take the position, and then afterwards you want to make sure you're in control of the position, and then you kind of use that. You maybe can collapse on the objective, you can collapse on whoever you want later on, like we saw in the first fight. That's why best teams, they fight for map control, they're not stacking down main. Yeah, they are doing that. That's how the games are still developing. Yeah, the people getting use the angles and stuff, but this is important. Hero shooter angle is so important. Okay, you gotta be fighting them back. Obviously, if there are too many resources which goes towards you, then you can give up the position and maybe retake different angle or maybe fight back for the angle. But this has to be done. You cannot just give them the space for free. That's why they've been actively pressuring Boger. If we saw the first fight, yeah, if we go back a little bit, they actively pressured Boger back. So it's going to be easier for them to use that stuff. They want this stuff. They want to stay here because better line of sight, more control over the map. There's no need to just only be controlling the main lane. Okay, so this is how we usually do that. Okay, to to continue with this part, the written part. Yeah, I also a lot of times, this is just more specific, it's more random. I wrote down some of the whatever came to mind, to be honest, right after I done this. There can be a lot of addition as well to all this info, but I also really suggest, even though you plan something around your ultimates before the fight, when you ultrack, try to also call out what you want to use mid-fight. Okay, if the fight is changing, if you can do that, this is harder to do, but if you can call when close to ultimates in extended fights, like we saw in the first fight in here, then this can be really, really nice. You can kind of have better solution plan set up. Maybe you will save some of the resources to execute the plan. This is really, really crucial. Okay, let me read the question. How do I organize this? Is on the GM player when I try to call for this stuff in my lobbies. It's like the tank, simply ignore it and try to funnel the teams through those checkpoints. Yeah, exactly. What this is where we get to this part. This is a good question. You don't want to micromanage your teammates. Okay, I want to say do not tell them, do not micromanage others. Okay, because they will be more defensive. It's going to be really, really tough for you to execute the play in the long term. They will maybe blame you. Sometimes this is not good. That's why if you want to do something, if there's no planning going on, obviously the ranked is not the most efficient environment in terms of the comms as well, but it's fine. You still can give your teammates direction and sort of asking them, help me do something. You want to do certain play, more proactive play, even though you're playing strategist or tank, whatsoever, just call out what you want to initiate with. Yeah, help me do this. Yeah, help me with using that ultimate. Can you guys help me out? I want to use my Ultron ultimate. Can you help me out? I'm using my Star-Lord ultimate from off angle, like we saw on the Kragi example, yeah? Obviously, there's still a chance they will not follow if we're talking about the ranked games, especially if it's a team setting. There's another talk you guys should be water viewing and making sure it's solved so everybody's on the same page to understand why you're following up. But in ranked, you try to communicate that, and there's a high percentage chance that this will happen. I mentioned that at the start of the class. Still, your communication is not the biggest priority. Okay, the biggest priority is your performance. Why streamers, they tell you communication is important? Because they solved most of the 99% of how to get value, and it's through performance. I'm telling you that's through perspective of the player. I've been in grinding towards the top 10, and through perspective of the coach. I've been coaching for multiple years. This is always the case. Yeah, really make sure if you're communicating, this is not showing off your performance, you still can perform really well. Okay, so you can communicate, help me do something. So it's more of a not nice, but it's not directive way. It's not micromanaging like some of the people would say, yo, can you stay here? Can you do this or that stuff? Can you try to, I don't know, why you're not shielding me? Yeah, this also gets us to this. Why you do this? Yeah, people will get more defensive. Yeah, make sure you give suggestions. Okay, can you help me out with this? Okay, can you help me out to do that play? I also suggest proactive. Okay, proactivity is important when we're talking about those kind of plays. It's not just try to, maybe peeling is important. Yes, sure, if somebody dives me, this is important to deal with stuff, but also solve your pressure first, solve what you can do first. There's also another part of this. You can help your teammates to do something, but it's mostly based on what are the big resources you have. So start with the cooldown, start with ultimates. Yeah, like we saw on the last fight. Yeah, like right. So Kragi specifically, how they could be communicating that stuff. Let's go back. Yeah, they could be calling out. Okay, I want to set up my ultimate on this Hygon here. Can you help me out? Yeah, can you guys help me out pushing? You can also ask specifically the resources. Yeah, can you give me the drone, for example? Yeah, the Necros. They want to give Kragi the drone, or maybe somebody else, they also want to initiate the pressure. let's try, just give kind of like a suggestion. Don't micromanage somebody. Usually give them suggestions so they will not be defensive. Kragi can say, let's try, obviously this is a team, so communication can be different, but if you're talking about the ranked, this is important. Just say, let's try to do this. I'll try to use ultimate. Maybe let's try to use Emma Frost ultimate over there as well. Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, if not, that's okay. You're still setting up your own play. Solve your play first. Make sure you ask for help and don't micromanage others. You just give suggestions, whatever you think will support you, that's fine. Yeah, and you can also, in case of, let's say, the Scraggy, yeah, they're not communicating, maybe there's your Star-Lord not communicating, if you, maybe this Ultron, you could be telling, okay, you don't have your ultimate and strategist, so what can you do? Yeah, you can just call out, okay, I will drone you, Star-Lord, so you can ult next fight. Okay, see how this is less micromanaging. You kind of just help them to do their own big stuff. You help your teammates do their big stuff. Okay, if you don't have your big stuff, cooldowns, ultimates. Okay, just simplifying to that. They have their big stuff. Okay, help me. Just tell them how can you help them do something. Yeah, help your teammates to do this certain play they could be doing. That's why you got to be pressing tab, tracking what they have, what they don't have. Call out resources you want when making a play. Yep, proactivity is crucial. Okay, we kind of skipped that part, but making sure your calls are effective is important. And just the more you do that, the easier it's going to be. Your call should be short, specific, answering the questions we talked about. And usually there's a lot of emphasis on avoid saying don't do this if something is not working. This is really bad because this gives no direction. When you're saying don't do this, don't do that, but what do we do instead? Yeah, what is the direction? If there's no direction, you're most likely going to fail. There's going to be problems with the planning. So you want to give direction with, say, let's do this. Can we do that? Yeah, this way you can push towards somewhere. Yeah, so there's more clear direction so everybody can set up. Yeah, you're solving this part here. You're solving the planning. So everybody can set up, everybody can execute their fight afterwards and prepare the resources. Yeah, any of you guys, if you've been in my scrims as well before, I always do that. And in a team setting, we also do talk a lot about that. For Hulk, should you call out every time you dive things? Yes, you do, 100%. The short question, yes, 100%. This here, setup, is where is your responsibility? You calling out, okay, I'm diving in C2-1 call. You can rewatch the first part, White Stallion, if you didn't have a chance. I broke that down a little bit. But yeah, yes, 100%. Anybody, if you want to get something out of it, call out what you do, when you do it, where, simply. And it's going to be all right. Okay, now, is there anything else? Yeah, to be honest, there's also some of the assumptions. Yeah, for example, a lot of mistakes happen because your teammates, or just in general, you also might be thinking that their team or your team have to do something. Yeah, maybe you expecting certain play from your team, and then you're like, oh, yeah, but you had to do this. Why you didn't do that? That's why it's important to solve the communication too, if possible. Especially we're talking about the team. Yeah, maybe this Star-Lord here, they would expect a bubble from Magneto if they would have one, or they would expect, I don't know, drone from Necros, but this is not happening. They're like, oh, why you didn't do that? But that's why it's important. Help me do this play. Okay, I want to ult. Can I get a drone? Okay, maybe you will not get it, but still there's a high chance because you will get it. The play is gonna work. That's how I've been also doing when I was grinding to top 10, I was always planning around what I would like to be done. I was, to be honest with you, I was communicating a lot when I was grinding. I think there's been even too much comms from me, I think. But anyway, when I've been grinding, I've been always trying to set up, okay, I want to do that or this. It still helps to some degree if your performance can be solved. Yeah, you maybe have your ultimate, okay, then you calling out, let's do this, help me out, do this play. Maybe I'm looking to use one of my abilities. Maybe in the case of Bogre, they don't have the ultimate. They could be telling, okay, I'm pushing the high ground guys. Yeah, let's say this here. I want to push this top, so help me out. Okay, let's just go back to this. Yeah, I'm pushing this top, help me out to push them out. Okay, this can be done. Okay, you can try to don't make assumptions. Yeah, make sure you scout and ask for the help, because a lot of the mistakes happen because they think they assume that something is gonna happen. Okay, call your team that you need the bubble. Call your team that you need that ability, and that's gonna be really good. The other question is, do you really need that in a specific scenario? But yeah, that's why I suggest performance comes first. Yeah, solve the performance, understand what you're doing on the character, and then afterwards you can also ask for the help when it's needed. Because sometimes there might be more important people who might need the cooldown, but usually if you have ultimate, especially if you do, then asking for support is gonna be important. I think ultimate is a really big thing, so why not? How do I encourage my team to move forward off my plays? Well, this is how. There's all of that. This is how. Help me do this. Help me do that. Ask for that. Tell when and where you do stuff. There's gonna be high chance that they will follow. And if we're talking about the rank, I'm gonna be honest with you. A lot of times they will not. But that's why this shouldn't be your first priority. It should be the performance, in my opinion. Okay, a lot of times they will not. That's fine, but at least you did your best to try to communicate. It depends on your rank as well. Yeah, if you're the highest rank, definitely do that as much as possible. Now you're in Celestial Eternity. Yeah, do that. I think GM is okay. GM1, GM2, probably you will try to communicate much more. At the lower ranks, as I mentioned, it's fine too. Just make sure it's a more steady progress, right? It's like, imagine you're trying to go in the gym and you just literally paying attention to this one specific exercise. Yeah, you're not paying attention to that exercise. So you need to exercise your entire body in a way. Yeah, this is how it works. And the most of your body here, the most of your value gets out of the performance. That's how I would put it. Okay. I think that's how I would answer it. Now, there are also some more team things I just wanted to mention, but yeah, maybe we can talk more about that, to be honest. Whatever came to mind, I wanted to say. There's usually needs to be captain on a team. We'll talk more about that, but in the team scenarios, I think some of the people would ask me, what do we do if we not sure there's a lot of chaos? Well, usually there's got to be captain, and captain gives you direction what to do. And captain can have a certain calls. They can just remind you, okay, let's do this default play. Usually it's in a more experienced environment. If you got a lot of playtime, you can call out the standard play you want to do in the given situation. Captain can also decide comp swaps and can do set plays when making a plan. The captain a lot of times can be the one who's also call out, let's do that, let's do this, yeah, let's look for that kind of specific play. And you can even have a set phrases when making a specific play, like in any other sport. That's something what we've done with the collegiate, with the other teams as well. We have a set of phrases where we understand it really well, but it's short and specific, like we mentioned here. The comps got to be short, specific, and answer the questions. Yeah, you can say, for example, stabilize a specific call. Yeah, you don't say, oh, can we wait, please? Something. Yeah, can we wait? There's a lot of words. Stabilize is one word. Okay, and now this makes it easier to understand for everybody, especially if we're talking about the team setting. That's why I need to come up with your own phrases. It can be even something people don't understand. That's fine. As long as you guys understand it as a team, it's good. For example, yeah, I also get the example, I'm going to pinch them. Yeah, what that means. I'm going to pinch them. It means you will try to go on the flank and you try to come from the opposite direction where your teammate's coming from. Yeah, the example of the pinch is, in the case of the pinching would be, if my team's pushing here, the Star-Lord would go here, the kind of pinch. Yeah, the pinch from behind, they're going to be cutting off the defensive rotation. This is the pinch. Yeah, it just, there can be plenty of examples this way. I can maybe give you more vocabulary later if you need as well, if we're talking about the team setting. But yeah, that's about it, to be honest. We've done most of the fundamentals, comms essentials. We'll talk about the team stuff more later on. Do you guys have any questions? Any more questions? We at the end of this replay. end this conversation. You guys want to unmute? You can ask the questions. Are there any? Okay, no questions it seems. Well, Paradox, not for me right now. Okay, perfect. I hope I answered your questions though. Okay, if there are no questions, guys, as usual, I will send everything to you in this channel here. Where's that? It's gonna be class and drills. Yeah, class and drills here. I will send the notes there, the presentation, what I prepared, just some of the written stuff is gonna be there too. If you have any questions, message me. You wanna have a session, message me as well. Just direct message me. We can definitely have a coaching. It doesn't matter, team coaching or one-on-one. I do a lot of team coaching now, to be honest. So yeah, if you guys interested in that too, feel free to message. All right. I will see everybody later. Good luck. Good luck in your games. I'm glad to have you here, guys. Bye-bye. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everyone being here. Thank you.